Now, gluten and dairy are inherently harmful and should be avoided. Now, I don't know at what point, at what sort of time, in the 2000s was it? I guess so, where like gluten started becoming the devil. And this we see it as, I've gone gluten free, I've cut out bread, I've cut out dairy, without any formal intolerance or diagnosis. Now, there is something to say here that if you are to eat certain foods and you do feel a bloating or you do feel something, then maybe there is an issue with that food you're eating. That could be in terms of the way it's cooked. It could be just it's irritating you in some way. For me, it's uncooked broccoli or beans that doesn't do well with me, so I don't really eat it as much. But if we're talking bread and dairy, some people are going to be lactose intolerant. So do you look for lactose-free type dairy products? And there's always like a spectrum to this. There's always a scale. And really, we see this as well from, again, just the demonization of foods and saying that this is contributing to you being fat and this is contributing to, your poor health. And people love jumping on these sorts of bandwagons because it's incredibly polarizing. You can be the police when it comes to all things dairy free and gluten free. And so, really, unless there's any kind of mild bloating or whatever, it is only 100% necessary to avoid gluten if you have been sort of diagnosed with celiac disease, or this sort of diagnosed sensitivity. Dairy, is well tolerated by a lot of populations, a lot of people can provide obviously great nutrients within that. And also, unnecessary restriction and this demonization of food can reduce the diet quality and also just increase the stress around, what it is I should eat. If I can go to this place, I'm in a supermarket, what do I buy? And it's funny, like, again, to kind of follow the money in some way. I remember when gluten-free wasn't a thing. And I remember then sort of being in my supermarket back home once, and you literally have a whole aisle dedicated to gluten-free products, which all, to be honest, taste, not as good as the original, but the cost associated with something that is gluten-free, for example, is huge. It's hugely more expensive. And so again, it comes down to the point around what is the underlying reason or rationale you are doing a certain thing, right? And so if it is because, yeah, you kind of heard that gluten-free is good and you don't experience any bad negative side effects with eating gluten, then you're probably just paying a lot more for a less tasty product. Also, see someone about it. If you suspect something or if you want to get yourself checked, go for one of these food intolerance tests or see your GP or you'll see your doctor about this kind of thing and only really feel like you can remove foods based on the fact that you have seen a clear intolerance. And Marvin, it may be worth talking sort of briefly just about your experience with the Whole30 diet because that is a really good way to see what is sort of proving challenging to the body.
Yeah, exactly. I actually want to go through that for myself soon, and it'll be great to kind of walk people through that process. Essentially, what you're doing is you are removing anything that that is a big offender, right? So people know that gluten is now becoming an offender for some people, whether it's bloating, celiac sensitivity, dairy can be another one, all these types of things. So essentially, what you do is you only eat meat, fruit. Nuts, seeds, and no pseudo cereals, no cereals. And you do that over a 30-day span, right? And then after 30 days, it's essentially like an elimination diet without having to go through very complex testing and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting because it probably is worthwhile for some people, right? Just because of the learning process as well. The some of the raving reviews you hear from people is, oh man, I actually can eat so much more food than I thought I could, in terms of quality and variety and that type of stuff, right? You expose your body to eggplants and people are having, artichokes and all sorts of things that they would have, ordinarily never really had. Obviously, for those that are insensitive, then you actually see some benefits. So like for myself personally, I've got eczema. And over the years, I've always tried to figure out what's going on, what's happening. I've lived on steroid creams, and lo and behold, tried to, cut out dairy for quite a while. I think I did a month, 2 months, and actually felt that there was a significant help there. So For me personally, dairy is a big one, but that may not be the case for everyone, right? So it's individual specific and not necessarily painting everyone with the same brush.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is if you are randomly eating through the course of the day, it's very difficult to attribute bloating or discomfort or whatever it might be to a particular thing, right? Because if you're eating totally different things each day, then you don't really know, how your body is reacting to this. Was it immediately afterwards, or was this from the previous meal this morning? And so if you can bring in that sort of structure and routine to your nutrition, at least for a short period of time, you can then see what is how your body responds, right? And so that for me is how I found with the broccoli, because back then I was in a position where, yeah, vegetables, I'll have them all and this and that. And then I remember there was one day I sort of wouldn't have the broccoli with my meal because I sort of ran out. And I was fine afterwards. And I was like, oh, okay, really? Okay, maybe. But it's going to be healthy, right? And so then, I bought it again and the same thing happened. So it's not just a case of like feeling like you have to live with the discomfort to your digestion, but actually like taking a bit more of a methodical approach on how you can identify what is leading to water retention, bloating, these sorts of things.
Abdullah mentioned a really good point where he says majority of healthy branded food end up just as unhealthy, intriguing paradox. And to add to that, Abdullah, what often then happens is because people think or deem these gluten-free, whatever, all that stuff to be unhealthy, then it's like, they have way more of that than they would just a regular Kit Kat, right? Because this is gluten-free, I can have 10, but if it's a Kit Kat, I'll have one. And so there's like a natural limiting factor when you know that you're eating something that is overly and
Mm.
hyper processed.
Yeah, and Sarah mentioned as well, like dairy is the problem for her. And for me, like it's funny because it's the same, except it's just in milk for some reason. Yogurt, I said take that back, milk and ice cream, but I still have ice cream. I've got lactose-free milk, but the ice cream is still there every now and again. And every time I'm like, why do I do this to myself, really? But we forget. We have goldfish memories, don't we?